Here are 19 terrifying facts about the US debt crisis. Number 1. The rate of growth of the US debt is in a vertical climb. Fact 2. Most of the programs created are not funded through tax dollars, but by the selling of government bonds for the purpose of borrowing currency with interest added. The third fact. It took 198 years for the government to borrow its first $1 trillion. Then, in just 12 years, mostly under Reagan, it borrowed another $3 trillion. By the first year of George W. Bush's administration, even before 9/11, the federal debt had risen to over $5.8 trillion. By 2010, it had risen to $202 trillion when all liabilities are included. Fact 4. To equal $202 trillion with a stack of $100 bills, the bills would rise over 127,000 miles into space. Fact 5. By 2006, gross interest payments on the national debt were running $406 billion a year, about 17% of all federal revenue. It now represents the government's largest single expense. Its value more than the Agriculture Department, Education, Energy, Housing and Urban Development, Interior, Justice, Labor, State, Transportation, and Veterans Affairs departments combined. Fact 6. This interest payment is not paid by the government, but by the U.S. taxpayer through taxes and inflation. Fact 7. On average, $5,000 is extracted from you each year not to pay for government programs, but to pay off interest on the national debt. Nothing is produced from it. No salaries, no roads, no highways, nothing but the interest is paid. Fact 8. The interest is also compounded. So even if the government finally balances the budget, the compound interest will continue to grow on that debt that already exists, and the national debt will continue to rise, despite an even revenue to expenditure ratio. Fact 9. By 2010, interest on the national debt was already consuming 44% of all revenue collected from personal income taxes. This is why the Federal Reserve is dangerous to American freedom. If we didn't have to pay interest on the national debt, we could cut our personal income taxes by 1/3 and even reduce corporate taxes dramatically. If we would drastically reduce the size of government, it would be possible to have no income taxes and still have a yearly surplus. And here's why having a large government is a problem. Fact 10. By 2008, outlays of the federal government were 1/4 of the nation's economy. An outlay is simply the amount of money spent on something. Fact 11. Nearly twice as many people work for the government than those who work for manufacturing companies in the private sector. Fact 12. There are more bank regulators than bankers. Fact 13. There are more Farm Bureau workers than farmers. Fact 14. More citizens receive government checks than those who pay income taxes. The 15th fact. By 1996, welfare benefits in 29 states were higher than the average secretary's wage. Fact 16. Entitlements are a way to garner votes and not a way to fix poverty. Although this could be argued as opinion rather than fact, I think there is enough circumstantial evidence to see this is indeed the case. Fact 17. The contractual obligations the government has, such as Social Security, will have to be paid out at a future time by selling more government bonds for debt-ridden loans that the taxpayer will have to pay. Fact 18. In 2010, 45% of all government spending was on entitlements. Fact 19. This is the last, but certainly not the least, scary fact about the US national debt and the US government. It is the consequence of what would happen if we were to try to pay back our national debt. Since all of the currency in the economy is created by debt using fractional reserve lending, all of those dollars will disappear once those loans are paid back. They will exist only as long as the debt behind them exists. Under it all, supporting the entire structure of the economy are the banking reserves of the Federal Reserve, which represents the Fed's monetization of debt. If we were to try to pay off the national debt, those reserves would disappear and our money supply would be undermined. The Fed would have to scramble into the world money markets and replace U.S. securities with bonds from corporations and other countries, which can be done, but the effect would be devastating. Congress would rather have a national debt than go this route. The truth of the matter is that the more government expands, the further into debt we will become and the more devaluation we will see in our dollar. By ending the Federal Reserve, we can end the compound interest payments that equal about $500 billion a year. By reducing the size of government and ending the Federal Reserve, we could see a massive surplus that could also provide, among other things, universal health care, along with massive growth of the private sector to create jobs the government relinquished. The Federal Reserve is the most dangerous entity on the face of the earth. As Nathan Rothschild said, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls the British money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply."